Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am finally wrapping up my reading from the month of December. I am recording this towards the end of January. It's just been a busy month. I've been away on a trip with my family to the beach, which has been lovely, and I've also just sort of been generally a little bit busy. So anyway, you don't need my excuses, you just need my wrap up. So here we go. Let's get into it. I actually read quite a few books in the month of December. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 books in the month of December, which is I would say my biggest reading month from 2023. I don't think I exceeded that any other month, so I've got quite a few books to talk about today. A couple of them are rereads and a couple of them are new, so let's get straight into it. So the first book that I finished in the month of December was a reread. It is The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. This is a really cozy book. I've spoken about it on this channel before, but as I say, it's a reread, and in fact this might be my second reread of this book. Anyway, super cozy. It's about this character here who is her mother is a blacksmith, and so she's sort of learning that trade, but then she encounters a tea dragon, and that sort of changes her trajectory. She meets some lovely people, and it's a vibe. It's a real beautiful book, and I really encourage you to pick it up. Definitely cozy vibes if that's what you're into. There's great representation in this book as well, of people of colour, as well as LGBTQI+ characters, disabled characters, so it's got it all. It's great. I really love this series, and I highly recommend it. 5 stars from me, as always. The next book that I finished is one I don't have a physical copy of. It is Unruly by David Mitchell, which I listened to on audiobook. The call number for this one is 941.0099. This is, I've written in my notes, a rollicking good book, a good adventure for the most part. So it's sort of a pop history of the monarchy in Britain up to Elizabeth I. So he starts with looking at sort of the pre-count kings and queens of Britain. You know, so there is a certain point at which officially we start counting the monarchs. However, there were monarchs before that. It was just sort of a little bit of a different situation. So he does start there and then goes through all of these monarchs. There were a few stretches that were a tiny bit dry in this book, I felt. Often when he moved a little too quickly, and I sort of lost the sort of thread of what he was talking about when that happened. But this was otherwise a very enjoyable listen to, and it was narrated by the author. I love David Mitchell. He's a great comedian who if ever he's on something, I'm always excited to see it. So yeah, it was very a good listen. There's some blue language in there too, so just heads up about that if you weren't expecting it in a historic book about the monarchs of Britain. But yeah, it's there. So just be aware of that. But yeah, I gave this 4 stars. It was a really good read. The next one is one I read digitally, and it's a Yorkshire Carol by Jennie Goutet. This was the palate cleanse that I needed for sure when I read it. Look, this far out from having read it, I don't remember much about it, but I really enjoyed it as I read it. In my notes I've written that the tropes in this book, it's a romance, friends to lovers, he falls first, and it's also zero spice, so it's not, this is sort of a historic romance. So if that's the sort of thing you're into, then highly recommend. I listened to the audiobook of this one, and it was narrated by Stevie Zimmerman, and they did a great job. The next book that I listened to, it was listened to because it was also an audiobook, is Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue. This was a really haunting story, and it follows the story of Anne Lister, but it's told from the perspective of a girl called Eliza, who is a girl who went to school with Anne Lister. And I believe there's some elements of truth to this story, but it's a sort of fictionalized story as well. So I've written here that it was very haunting, a haunting story of first love at a girls' boarding school where everything is felt with like extreme intensity, and you can really feel that. I think Emma Donoghue did a great job of kind of capturing that sort of like the intensity of emotions that you have when you're that age. So Eliza, our protagonist, is of mixed heritage. Her father is an English doctor and her mother is his Indian common law wife. But her parents have passed away, and her father's friend is her carer. She also has a sister that's also at the school, and they sort of have a sort of a on again, off again kind of relationship in the way that teenagers can be a bit funny about their siblings. But yeah, so that was an interesting dynamic, I guess. So Anne Lister is the new student at the school, and she and Eliza become, you know, really firm friends really quickly. Anne Lister is weird. She sort of does all of these things, but she ends up kind of commanding the room eventually. So initially everybody's really hesitant about her, but then, you know, they sort of come to appreciate her and like her a lot. But she's, you know, an odd bod. Like, she's definitely different to the other girls that are at the school. And then that friendship eventually leads to a more intimate connection. And this story is told in a series of flashbacks as well. And through that, we discover that Eliza is now alone and in a mental asylum, which is, you know, a very jarring compared to what you're hearing about in the boarding school. But she sort of, you can tell, kind of still holds this flame for Anne. And then you sort of, as the story evolves, you kind of see what the dynamics are now between them. I felt it was a bit of a sad ending to this book. That it begins a lot more hopeful. So yeah, that was an interesting dynamic. So I gave this one 3.75 stars. It wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it was definitely compelling enough. And yeah, it had explored some interesting themes. So yeah, I don't know that it would be for everybody, but it was a relatively well written book. So yeah, if you're interested in the life of Anne Lister, which I am, and you know, I think by all accounts she wasn't a particularly nice person, you know, for all of her kind of groundbreaking that she did. Yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this one, I guess. Okay, the next one I do have a physical copy of, and that is this one, which I finally finished. It's an Admirable Point by Florence Hazrat. The call number for this one is 411. This was the final book that I needed to read for the Dewey Decimal Reading Challenge in 2023, so I made it. Thank goodness for that. And this is a book that is all about the exclamation mark, and sort of the history of it. To be honest, this was not a great read. I didn't enjoy it very much. It was a slog to get through. There were some good essays in here, but some of them were super pointless and a bit listy, and I don't always appreciate a listy kind of essay. There were also some really random images included at times too, and have I marked anything? No, I have not. Just a bit random, like it was like, oh, we should insert an image here, and sometimes it was a bit weird. And what else have I written here? Yeah, just very mid. It was just a very mid sort of book, but I got through. I finish my challenge. I gave it 2.5 stars. I think this probably could have just been an essay and it would have been a more enjoyable read, but as a book it was just kind of like harping on a little bit too much about a topic that really didn't have that much to say. So yeah, it was a bit mid, unfortunately. All right, flipping the page in my journal, and we are now on to the Tea Dragon Festival. So you would have heard me talking earlier about the Tea Dragon Society. This is the follow-up. It's a prequel. It's not a sequel. There is a third book in the series I don't yet have, but it is coming out in paperback this year in 2024, and I have pre-ordered it. So hopefully that will turn up in the next couple of months and I'll be able to read that one as well. This is also a reread for me. This is set in the past from the events of the Tea Dragon Society, and there are 2 characters that reoccur from the Tea Dragon Society. Obviously they're younger, but they are not the main focus of this book. This is all set in the mountains where one of the characters comes from. He goes back home to sort of reconnect with his family, and this is our protagonist is his, I want to say niece, maybe someone who's related to him anyway, and she meets dragon. So there are lots of tea dragons in their little village, but this is like a proper dragon, and there are events ensue. I won't go too much into it. It's not a long book, so I don't want to kind of spoil it for anybody, but it's super cozy as well. Still delightful. 5 stars. Love it. This series is just absolutely stellar. Okay, the next one was a bit of a weird one, and it's this one, Diary of a Void by Emmy Yagi. This is, I believe, a translated book. Let me see who translated it. Yes, translated from the Japanese by David Boyd and Lucy North. This is a book about a woman who, for purposes of getting out of stuff at work, tells her colleagues that she's pregnant, and then she sort of has to kind of keep that up as a ruse, but then it sort of, the lines blur a lot in this. She's clearly slightly unhinged, but yeah, it's a weird book, and I don't know how I felt about it, to be honest. It was really confusing is what I've written in my journal. So she lies at work that she's pregnant, then it really seems like she is, including a doctor being able to see a baby on an ultrasound. But then it seems like it's still a lie at the end. No clue. I just had no clue what was going on half the time in this book. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. It was weird, and I wasn't really sure about it, but maybe it would be for other people, and I just didn't get it. I don't know. So that was my take on that one. The next book is another reread. This one I listened to on audiobook, which is how I consumed it the first time as well. It's Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrun. This is a Christmassy romance, and it, as opposed to my other Christmassy romance that I talked about earlier, the Yorkshire Carol, this one has a lot of spice in it, and it's also 2 women, so a sapphic spice, shall we say. So the main character in this book is kind of irritating from time to time, and there's cheesy bits, of course, in this, and also the scenario is kind of a little bit outside of the realms of possible, but if you can put that aside, this is a really, really fun book, and I felt slightly improved on rereading. So my initial review of this book I gave 3.5 stars, and I've upped that to 3.75. So it did slightly improve on rereading. And I also really appreciated the disability representation in this. A character in this book has very accurately represented ADHD, and also the main character has a generalized anxiety disorder. So that was I thought really realistically represented, as well as there being great queer representation in this book as well. So this, you know, I enjoyed it. It's probably not for everybody, but as a Christmas Eve, it was just what I really wanted to listen to, so I put it on and listened to it again. So yeah, it was great. Kiss Once for me, 3.75 stars. Super fun. Okay, moving now into books for my ongoing long project that I'm working on with one of my book clubs, where we are reading around the world. So the book that, despite this, the title of this book, which is A Greek Love, this is actually a book for Cuba. So the author is Zoe Valdés, and I felt this was a very interesting book, and I learnt about Cuba and its political situation, as well as enjoying the story. So basically, we've got a Cuban woman, at the time she's a young, like a teenager, and she falls pregnant to a Greek immigrant, not immigrant, sorry, he's a sailor, so he's sort of in port and then he leaves. And he at the time never knew that she had fallen pregnant from their liaison. So he sort of goes back to Greece, and she has the baby. She's rejected by her father because of this, and, you know, pretty severely beaten by him because of this as well. He's a real kind of curmudgeonly character, and yeah, pretty awful, really. Yeah, and anyway, it sort of then kind of follows this character as so her son ends up becoming a musician when he grows up, and they have the opportunity to go to Greece, and so it's sort of the story ensues from there. I felt like the pacing was a little bit fast, particularly at the end, and some of the tension building felt a bit odd. Perhaps some things were lost in translation, I'm not sure, but yeah, this was a good read, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then we come to A Christmas Carol. This is not the edition that I read. This is a tradition that my husband and I have now on Christmas Eve, where we listen to the abridged version read by Sir Patrick Stewart, and this is something that I enjoy every year. I won't go into too much detail here. We understand the story of A Christmas Carol. It's a classic. I should at some point read the full story, but this is just such an enjoyable listen for us each year, and it's something that I look forward to on Christmas Eve. So yeah, 5 stars. Loved it. Fantastic. Okay, the last book that I read was another book by Zoe Valdés. So for this month of my book club, we were able to kind of choose between the two, and I ended up having enough time to read both, so I just read both. So this was Yocandra in the Paradise of Nada by Zoe Valdés. This was, I felt, a little bit better than A Greek Love, so I'm glad that I read this one as well. What have I written in my notes? Some things remain mysterious at the end of the book, but it is well written and reflects life in Cuba. So yeah, this was all about, to be honest, it's escaping me. So the plot of A Greek Love has kind of stuck with me a little bit more than Yocandra, which is interesting, given that I rated this one 4 stars and enjoyed it a little bit more. But we follow Yocandra, and that's basically as much as I can remember. So maybe I need to review that. But it was a 4-star read at the time, so, you know, I'll stick with it. I wonder if I've written more in my other reading journal that I write more detailed things in. Let's find out. Okay. Yes, I have. Okay. Okay. This book begins in purgatory, much like The 7 Moons of Marley Almeida, which is a book that we read also for the Reading Around the World Challenge, in that we never find out how she died. She's sent back. The ensuing story, I cannot work out if it is after being sent back or before dying. I really did like the book, though. That is still pretty vague. Okay, so Yocandra in the Paradise of Nada. Can't tell you much more about it because I've completely forgotten about the plot of the book. So that was my final read for the month of December. So here's my little stack, but most of the books that I read I don't have a copy of. There it is. But yeah, that's my wrap up for the month of December. Thank you very much for your patience over over the last few weeks while I've sort of been a bit erratic with posting. We should be getting back to a regular schedule now as we head back into the rest of this year. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, especially if your opinions differed from mine about them. Would love to hear all about what you've been reading as well, so feel free to drop those in the comments too. Alright, thanks for watching everyone, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.